Good morning and welcome to Weekends with Whitney. We come to you this morning from the Whitney Plantation. A plantation like no other. It's the first and only slave museum and memorial in the United States. You won't see hoop skirts and mint juleps here. Instead, you'll peer into slave quarters and jails that held them. It's an honest look into a dark period of American history.
You can't rewrite history, but it's our belief that we can cure many of the evil hangovers from slavery, like racism. We can't make it disappear, but we can chase the hell out of it and get it back in the woods or wherever it came from through education.
In rare audio recordings, you'll hear, in their own voices, former slaves who lived and worked on plantations.
They know enough about reading right there. All that I know, they teach you to mind your master and your missus.
Then Dr. Nick shares his insights on love, healing, and moving forward after we toured Whitney Plantation together. But first, we begin at this memorial on Whitney Plantation. It lists the names of the people who were enslaved in the history of Louisiana. There are 107,000 names. Names that before now were mostly forgotten. They still might be forgotten if it weren't for this man, John Cummings, owner of Whitney Plantation.
And what we wanted to do here was to educate mostly people with my color skin on the facts of slavery, the horrific facts of slavery.
Yet that's not why he bought the plantation 16 years ago. This successful New Orleans trial attorney bought it as a real estate investment. At the act of sale, he was surprisingly handed an 8-volume study on the property's history and significance. That study was commissioned in the 90s when a chemical company wanted to build a new plant on these grounds. Environmentalists and preservationists protested so much, the company sold it. After he bought it, John read that historical study. It was a history he'd never been told.
And during that year, I started to read it. Being a lawyer, I was interested in successions, interested in the paperwork. Every succession had an inventory of all of the assets here. And slaves were the second to most valuable asset here, slaves.
The slaves' names, ages, job skills, and purchase price on the auction block were listed for tax purposes.
This is a big black buck Negro. He's stout as a mule and good for any kind of work. And he'll never give you any trouble. How much can I offer for him?
Sold for $2,700. Anderson, the #1 bricklayer and mason.
And I saw that there was a woman who was worth maybe twice as much as any other female slave. And although many of the slaves were described as coopers, they made barrels, all the sugar was shipped out in barrels, they made barrels. Or a cart man, he was a guy that had the oxen and would walk with the carts, the sugar cane be thrown in there. All of those things. We got to this woman. She was a good breeder. Good breeder. I think she had 9 children the last 11 years.
A human being bought to breed. That inhumanity stirred something deep in John.
Wade in the water, wade
How much am I offering for her?
16 sold for $1,500. Louisa, age 24.
The reason that it's shocking me is it was never in my education. And I look around at all of the other Caucasians and I'm thinking, I just can't do this anymore. It's my job, as best I can, to explain it in such a way, and that's what I did for a living with juries, explain it. And if you must do this, I must no longer walk through racism and just admonish it. I can't do that anymore.
At that moment, he decided Whitney Plantation would become that one place in America where everyone could learn the history of slavery in America. It took 15 years and $8 million of his own money. It opened 18 months ago. In its early stages and continuing today, he sought out this man to research the slaves who lived here.
Dr. Ibrahim Sek knows more about Atlantic slave trade than anybody else in the United States.
60% of slaves brought to the United States were from his African home country, Senegal.
They were sold away. And when the Europeans came, they were sold, to come and be enslaved here in the Western Hemisphere. So this trade could not happen without the involvement of the African elite.
It's always people with power.
Yeah, Africans have to acknowledge that too.
Sure. Yet the Whitney Plantation is not about playing the blame game. It's about understanding the past to build a better future for all.
Many will say, well, I have a hard time. We've enjoyed the tour, but I have a hard time apologizing for that. I had nothing to do with it. And I said, well, nobody's asked you to apologize. Why should you apologize for something that happened back then? I agree with that.
Alexis Jones came all the way from California to tour the Whitney. Her ancestors were Louisiana slaves.
We come from an ancestry of slavery, and I'm proud because I feel like slavery is what kind of built America in a sense. So we have roots in the building of America, and I think that that's awesome. Something to definitely be proud of.
She and even her sister Ashley, who's now in college, were not taught much in school about slavery. The majority of Americans weren't either.
I think it's something that people should be educated about and know about it, and then take that information and move forward so things like that don't happen ever again.
Critics say exposing the brutal realities of slavery here will only stir anger and hatred among Americans. Many disagree.
Learn about it, remember it, but then move on. Don't let that be something to hold you back or have anger towards people who don't necessarily deserve that.
And still to come on Weekends with Whitney, what was a typical day like in the life of a slave? I'll show you. You'll hear the rare recorded voices of those who lived it. Then, Dr. Nick shares his insights after touring Whitney Plantation, right after this.
Maggio, the only way to go. Maggio Buick GMC, your satisfaction's our specialty. We really deliver on Falls River, here in New Roads. Small town atmosphere, legendary service for over 60 years. Maggio, the only way to go. The only way to go, that's Maggio.
9-time winner of the prestigious GMC and Buick Mark of Excellence Award.
Hi, I'm Ian James, financial advisor and president of Capital Financial Group. Like millions of Americans, you're likely paying higher taxes and higher fees than you probably should. With 20 years of industry experience, I have a proven plan to analyze your investments and reduce hidden costs and fees. You work hard for your money. It's time to let your money work hard for you. Call me, Ian James, for a free, no-obligation portfolio review and a brighter financial future.
Welcome back to Weekends with Whitney. Because of the Federal Writers Project back in the 1930s, we know a lot about the history of slaves from their own mouths. President Franklin Roosevelt created the project. 6,000 writers canvassed the country to get oral histories from the last generation of American slaves.
Tell you the truth, when I think of it today, I don't know how I'm living.
Life for many slaves was cruel, punishing, and brutal. Those chosen to work in the big house often had it better than the rest. Some had adequate food and clothing, were taught to read and how to behave, like Alice Gaston.
And they all treat me nice. All the white folks that know me, they treat me nice. And if I want anything, I'll ask for it. I was taught it that way by my old master. Don't steal, don't lie. And if you want anything, ask for it. Be honest in what you get. That's what I was raised up with.
Alice was the exception. The rule was terror and torture for the hard laborers. The majority of slaves were field hands. They plowed, sowed, and cut sugarcane, cotton, tobacco, or other crops. Former slave Fountain Hughes says the work was endless.
Night never comes out. You have nothing to do. Time to cut tobacco. If they want you to cut all night long out in the field, you cut. And if they want you to hang all night long, you hang tobacco. It didn't matter about your tired, being tired, you're afraid to say you're tired.
A typical slave day started early, around 3:30 when the bell rang. They quickly ate breakfast, some even from a trough.
All of them, you know, would get around that tree with spoons and eat such like mush or soup or something like that.
They worked until noon when the bell rang again. After 30 minutes for lunch, it was back in the fields. If a slave wasn't working hard enough, an overseer would beat them into submission.
But I think that old woman, poor old woman, carried in the peach orchard and whipped her. And, you know, just tied her hand this way, you know, around the peach orchard tree. I remember that just as well, looked like to me, I can't, and round the tree and whipped her. And well, she couldn't do nothing but just kick her feet, you know, just kick her feet. But it just had her clothes off down to her waist, you know. Just didn't have her plumb naked, but they had her clothes down to her waist. And every now and then they'd whip her.
Work finally stopped at sundown. Slaves ate, then slept where they could.
Other people didn't have no beds when they were slaves. They all slept on the floor. Pallet here, pallet there. Just like a lot of wild people.
They couldn't set foot off the plantation unless their master gave them a written pass.
If I had that pass, I could go wherever he sent me, and I'd have to be back. You know, whoever he sent me to, they'd give me another pass, and I'd bring that back so to show how long.
More than 10,000 ran away every year. Overseers would hunt them on horseback with a pack of dogs. When caught, they'd be whipped until they bled in full view of the other slaves to terrorize and intimidate them too. If a slave ran away 3 times, they were killed or sold.
We were slaves. We belonged to people. They sell us like they sell horses and cows and hogs and all like that.
His grandfather was sold and owned by the writer of the Declaration of Independence, the 3rd President of the United States.
My grandfather belonged to Thomas Jefferson.
Nearly 250 years later, the men, women, and children whose back-breaking labor propelled the U.S. economy onto the world stage are honored and recognized. They transformed America from a poor country in 1800 to one of the richest in the world by 1860. Before the Civil War, the South alone had the 4th largest economy in the world. The South also had more millionaires than any place else in the country.
The economy of this country was founded on slavery.
Whitney Plantation is home to the first and only slave memorial in the U.S. But owner John Cummings hopes it's the first of many.
Dallas came here. They want to build one in Dallas. Well, as soon as Houston finds out, they're going to come here and they're going to do one better than them. Virginia, already talked to Terry McAuliffe, who's the governor of Virginia. And we're going to work with them to build a substantial slave memorial there.
Here there are multiple memorials and moving artwork. The Field of Angels pays tribute to the 2,200 slave children who died here in St. John the Baptist Parish before their 3rd birthday. It was all in a span of just 40 years. These life-size statues of children bought and born into slavery are reminders of lost childhoods. Their vacant eyes, shadowy depictions of those blind to their suffering and no future to really see. This wall of honor pays homage to the more than 350 slaves owned by the Haydell family here before emancipation.
Free at last, free at last.
Then freedom and hallelujah portrayed here. 34,000 visited Whitney Plantation last year, twice what they expected. This year, they're on pace to welcome 70,000. Who touched you the most? What person who came as a visitor experienced it that you were completely moved?
The one, I couldn't move, I had to sit down, and I cried. It was by a girl who was 23 years old. She said, and when I die, should people ask, I wonder where her soul went, tell them it's still at the Whitney.
Many feel steps here are raising consciousness, conversation, and connection.
Because all we have is to love and be loved. If I love, then that means I have to take care of me, love me. But it also means I have to love you, respect you, and value you. Because if we don't love, then we haven't lived at all.
Jennifer Davidson came from Northern Ireland to experience it.
Movement, but I think it's taken this long for us to really get our heads around it. I mean, and it was brought up in the tour that it still hasn't been addressed in education in schools, and that's a problem in the UK as well as the US.
It's through education, John's convinced, we can right the ship.
Education is the number one experience that we denied to the slaves. They could not be educated. Couldn't.
If I thought, had any idea that I'd ever be a slave again, I'd take a gun and just end it all right away. Because you're nothing but a dog.
After slavery, he says we failed them again.
Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me.
Didn't know where to go. You see, after freedom broke, just like he turned something out, Didn't know where to go.
Think of the humiliation, degradation that blacks suffered after freedom. They were hung from trees.
And slavery was just reinvented under another name, that's Jim Crow. We need to educate everybody and to get equal opportunities for everybody and to mend the minds of everybody too.
Educated people get along with each other. They understand dispute resolution. I guarantee you, the day that we get more African Americans into college than into penitentiaries, and into graves. That's when you and I can talk and say, we're turning that big boat around slowly. It's education.
As symbolized here at the museum's entrance, John says it's time to pull up anchor.
Every slave and every slave owner came from a different village on a different boat. But today we find ourselves all in the same boat. And we must take another voyage together, no matter how painful, and to understand our participation in this history and discover a way that we can cure the evils that were heaped upon these Africans when they first came to our shores.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
The Whitney Plantation is open every day except Tuesdays, 9:30 to 4:30. If you'd like more information, go to whitneyplantation.com. And still to come, we sit down with Dr. Nick after his tour of the Whitney Plantation. We discuss love, healing, and moving forward.
Buying or selling a home can be stressful and exhausting, unless you choose me. I'm Regina Roselle with KDK Realty. Don't just trust your largest asset to anyone. Go with success. I've sold hundreds of homes over the last 10 years, and I can get you top dollar for your home, as well as get you the best price on your new one. Email me at buywithregina@gmail.com. I'll do all the work. All you have to do is pack. Let's get moving together.
Welcome back to Weekends with Whitney. We are joined by Dr. Nick Abraham, who joined us on the tour of the Whitney Plantation, and we're here in the church.
I am so grateful. I have always wanted to go on the road with you. Thank you.
You were so
what
welcome.
An experience, and the interviews and the plantation that I've seen many but
yes, you've been to a lot of plantations.
But not one that really focused as much as this one did on slavery.
Well, and it's the first ever, and it was important for me to thank you for accepting my invitation to come and join us.
It's powerful.
Yeah.
Also a downer. And you get mad at me, but I'm so sensitive. It hurts.
I know.
And yet, I think that's one of the things that I just wanted to share quickly with our viewers. I hear so many people say, "Get over it. I didn't live through that. That wasn't me." It's still our national story. It's just like when I work with clients and they say they want to close the door on their past. I'm like, the past is a part of your story. Let's learn more of our story and accept it, but at the same time, continue to do whatever we can to change it and develop it and make it better.
Right.
As you were trying to say to one of those people you interviewed, you go for that career.
Yes.
You go for that career. Do you know how much that meant to her?
I know.
You know, to hear someone of your status encouraging her.
Well, that's kind of
so that's an important thing, Whitney, for us to do, is
because
to continue to talk about the
some
fact that it's real.
that say that we're going backwards in history by having a museum like this, we're not moving forward.
And you know what I think is fascinating? Is what they brought up today in the tour, that there's no monument anywhere to slaves. I walk in Washington and I see the Vietnam Monument and I cry like a baby because I look at all those names. I go to the Jewish Holocaust Museum and I cry like a baby. World War II in New Orleans. I'm not pushing it. I'm just saying it's very interesting that there's not, except for here. Here they've got the stories and the names, which were fascinating to me, to have to read those stories and hurt how the families were broken, constantly broken, and how women were more valuable because they were breeders.
They were breeders.
I never knew that. I thought
bred like cattle to 15 different men throughout their lifetime or more.
Yes.
Because they produce good stock.
Yes, but can we just close, because I know you interviewed a lot of people. We don't have much time today. I stopped and saw the banjo. They made banjos out of a pot or some kind of a kettle with a long piece of wood. They would somehow manage to do it and take horsehair. And I don't know how it worked, but 4 horsehair for the bass line, 3 for the next, 2, and then 1 and 1. And they didn't wind them up, they tightened them up, and that was their banjo. And that's how they made music. The creativity, even in the worst of situations, the creativity, the need to sing, the need to play music. You know, music is my heart.
The need to celebrate, even though
the need to celebrate. And there may have been more instruments, but
that was the first, they said, the
remember
banjo.
that when we both looked there and kind of had a tear? It was really very touching. So thank you very much. I hope everyone is moved to come out here.
Yeah, you'll learn a lot.
Whitney Plantation,
yeah,
but not named after you.
No relation.
You're Kentucky.
Thanks for joining us.
Such a privilege. Bye, everyone.
And much more. Weekends with Whitney coming up right after this.
It was dead of freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind set on freedom.
Atlas Foundation Repair, fixing your foundation problems for more than 30 years while preserving and protecting your trees. Thanks so much for joining us on this Sunday as we shared with you the story of Whitney Plantation and the story of slavery. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Wishing you a great Sunday. This morning, we leave you with some other sights from here on the plantation.